If you're multitasking by browsing the internet for a brand new QD-OLED while at the same time looking out your window as the repo men walk out the door with your couch, well, I might just have the best OLED for you. Yes, that's right. Just because you're on a budget, that doesn't mean you have to compromise, and that's why today we're going to be taking a look at the MSI MAG 271QP QD-OLED X24. I thought they couldn't make the name any longer. They did. Now, this is a 27-inch 1440p 240Hz QD-OLED glossy monitor with a DisplayPort HDR TrueBlack 400 certification. Yes, of course, it does support G-Sync and FreeSync, and in terms of the ports, well, it's pretty bare bones, coming with two HDMI 2.1s, a DisplayPort 1.4, and a headphone out. But honestly, fellas, what can you expect when it's coming in regularly at $450, roughly, with a 3-year warranty, which, yes, does include burn-in. Now, all that might sound great, but is it really great? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. Now, real quick before I do, this was lent to me for review by MSI, so that won't be changing any of my opinions, and if you want to pick one up, I will have affiliate links in the description below. Also, if you've never used a QD-OLED, well, get ready because this is going to absolutely blow any LCD out of the water, and let's go ahead and jump into why. Now, let's start off with the colors first. What can you expect out of a QD-OLED? Well, you can expect some of the best colors that any display in the market can show today, at least when it comes to monitors. Reds are gonna be so vibrant and deep, and that goes for every single color. But what about the accuracy? Well, let's take a look at the Portrait Display Calman Ultimate results, which, by the way, I'm a part of the reviewer program, and I'll have links to that in the description as well. But in any case, out of the box, we can see that it's in a mode that just ain't right, fellas. It has too much color for most SDR content, and it's not following the EOTF curve properly. Now, this can be addressed to a degree, and you can definitely get it to be a lot better. However, it is still unfortunately raising some shadow detail. Now, in terms of the actual color checker analysis, this does come in with an average delta E of 2.8, which is all right for a gaming monitor, but nothing to scream home about. Now, as for HDR, whether you're looking at the TrueBlack 400, the Peak 1000, or the EOTF Boost mode, all three of these modes, unfortunately, do have some EOTF tracking issues, with all of them, unfortunately, crushing shadow detail. Now, as for the color checker in HDR, it does pretty decent with an average delta E of 8.29, and the HDR BT 2020 gamut coverage is a pretty decent 80.25 for UV. So the TLDR, well, in terms of color and accuracy, it's definitely gonna look great, and I think for most people, it'll be accurate enough where you won't really care. However, I do want to mention it's not perfect. In SDR, unfortunately, in the correct mode, it has a little bit of raised shadow detail, and in HDR, it has some crushed shadow detail, and the color isn't necessarily perfect. So I certainly wouldn't be using this for any sort of professional work, and for gaming, there may be some scenarios in which shadow detail doesn't quite look right. However, as a whole, I think it's pretty decent, and considering the price, I certainly wouldn't be complaining about it too much. Speaking of complaining, let's talk about HDR, because I always gotta complain about this on OLEDs. And unfortunately, this OLED, much like every OLED monitor on the market, doesn't quite get bright enough. If you take a look here at my chart, it does come in a peak window brightness test at the D65 white point as a pretty average brightness, although it's technically at the lower end of the chart. And for an actual HDR game, Baldur's Gate 3, well, once again, it has some pretty similar results. It's certainly not going to blow you away. I mean, when you take this and you compare it to something like the 55-inch LG G5, which, by the way, is behind me right now, well, that thing's gonna be around 5 times brighter than pretty much any QD-OLED monitor out there. Now, that being said, I still do believe that the HDR on this monitor is worth enabling. It is still much better than the SDR experience, but it's just not gonna hit quite as hard as a TV would. And hopefully one day we'll get somewhat close to that, but today is not the day. And to be honest with you, if you've never seen an HDR OLED TV, this probably won't bother you at all. It's gonna be a huge jump from any LCD that you might be used to if that's what you're still on in 2025. But one thing that QD-OLED does exceptionally well, at least in a dark room, is the contrast. Yes, every OLED monitor in a dark room is gonna have infinite contrast because every single pixel can turn completely off and completely on. This absolutely mogs every LCD or mini LED on the market, and you are going to get contrast levels that will blow you away. And in my opinion, this is the most important aspect of any display on the market. So this, it absolutely nails. I mean, you are going to get pixel perfect images, even of things such as star fields. That's something that nothing else can get close to. But keep in mind, I did say in a dark room, because unfortunately QD-OLED, yes, it does have issues with ambient light handling. So here you will see if you turn the lights on, or even if you have a window with significant light coming into your room, yes, the screen unfortunately will lose some shadow detail at times, potentially, and it will start to look a little bit purple or gray depending on your lighting. So keep that in mind. To get the best picture out of the screen, please try and control the lighting in your room, or look for another type of display technology. But now let's talk about gaming. This is exactly why you're here. And is this monitor good at gaming? Well, the answer is yes. A 240Hz QD-OLED is one of the best displays you could possibly buy for gaming today. It's going to be lightning quick, and the motion is also going to be excellent. I mean, take a look here at my chart. You can see here that at 24 milliseconds of total system latency, this is certainly an extremely fast monitor. As sure, it looks like it's near the middle of the pack, but keep in mind, this is going up against the fastest monitors that you can buy today. So a very respectable result. And likewise with the UFO test, if you take a look here at the 240Hz QD-OLED motion, this is what you can expect. And when you compare this to the mini LED on the right, it is an absolute blowout in terms of motion performance. Sure, 500Hz is faster, it's more clear in motion, but I do feel like 240Hz is a good sweet spot for an OLED today. I mean, imagine all those people moving really fast in a game like Overwatch or Apex Legends or the finals. You're gonna see them very, very clearly with a monitor like this, and it will genuinely give you an advantage over those who are using slower, older LCDs. They won't be able to see the same clarity that you can. Now, as for the text clarity, unfortunately, this is another area where QD-OLED doesn't do too well, especially at 1440p. Now, at 4K, it's for the most part pretty unnoticeable, but at 1440p, the total amount of pixels is low enough where, yes, text clarity does become an issue. You will see the red and green fringing at the edges of text, and there's really nothing you can do to totally solve this problem. Now, that being said, it does have a clear glossy coating, which is, thank God, one of the best things you can get on the market today. Now, yes, you will have direct reflections rather than the diffused reflections that you get on a matte coating, but the advantage in clarity is absolutely massive. In fact, I'd probably take personally a 1440p display with a glossy coating over a 4K display with a matte coating, as the difference in clarity really is that huge. And if you're coming from an LCD or any other matte display, which you probably are if you're looking at this display, I'm telling you, this is the single biggest upgrade you can make on a display in 2025. It will be an enormous uplift in clarity, the likes of which you may have never seen before outside of TVs, but it's hard to imagine using a TV as a monitor. Trust me, put this in front of your face and you will be like, wow, what was I doing with that matte coating display my whole life? Where were you? Well, it's right here. Affiliate links in the description again, of course. You know, daddy's gotta eat. But in any case, it also has excellent viewing angles and uniformity, basically perfect, so let's move on. And in terms of issues, I basically had none. The menu and the firmware was great, and the only thing that might kind of irk some people is that, like with every OLED, you might get a little bit of VRR flicker, especially at inconsistent frame rates in dark scenes. So overall, what do I think about this monitor? Well, I'll tell you this much. For the price, it's great. I mean, you are getting excellent overall clarity, motion clarity, latency, contrast, and color. It absolutely mogs older LCDs in all of those categories. And those are very, very important, especially contrast, where it dominates in a dark room. However, it's not perfect. It does unfortunately have poor text clarity, poor ambient light handling, and poor HDR brightness, which is to be expected in 2025, at least on monitors. But when you consider how good this thing is and how good the price is, as it normally comes in at around $450, I see it there frequently at least, and sometimes it's a little bit more. Well, that is just an insanely good price for an insanely good monitor. And for that reason, I'm gonna give this thing a solid 9 out of 10. It is just a value champion. And honestly, I think it's probably the best value monitor that I've reviewed in 2025. So if you're interested in one, once again, I'll have affiliate links in the description below. I highly recommend it. And make sure you get subscribed for my best display roundups coming soon here on The Display Guy.